start.
All right.
This is a study of the book of Ruth in depth. I compiled this study. I can't remember whether I taught it in Germany or not. If I taught it in Germany, it was in the early 80s. So I know I taught it in Japan because I taught it at the chapel in Japan. And the commander and deputy commander, what are they called? That's not what they're called, but I always forget. Anyway, the two top guys at the naval base came to our Bible study. And the wife of the deputy commander said it was the first Bible study he'd ever gone to. So that was a real compliment. And then they wanted me to record it when they left. So anyway, a long, long time ago, I put this study together. I just this summer made it into a study guide. I didn't have the guide before. So you can take notes and maybe remember a little better than, just talking. All right. So let's get started. So how many of you have studied the book of Ruth before?
Long ago.
You've all studied it before. Right, all right. There are many different ways to study it. I guarantee this one will be a little different. It's going to be very, very in-depth, and we're also going to look at some typology of different pictures that are in the book of Ruth. There's several different ways you can look at it. And so on your first page, it says the book of Ruth is short but profoundly moving text found in the Old Testament. Nestled between Judges and 1 Samuel, Ruth tells the story of a Moabite widow who becomes the great-grandmother of King David. Its themes of loyalty, faith, and divine providence have resonated through the centuries of Jewish and Christian tradition. This study will help you navigate the book's chapters, analyze its themes and characters, and reflect on its enduring significance. There are people who know absolutely nothing about the Bible who are familiar with the book of Ruth. It's regarded by the secular world as one of the high points in literature. It's considered a masterpiece, an ingenious reading of detail. Its themes of loyalty, faith, and divine providence have resonated through centuries of Jewish and Christian tradition. Now, the author of Ruth is actually unknown, but tradition ascribes it to the prophet Samuel. We just started. We're going to be looking at this book in three ways. The picture of the redemption of Ruth by her kinsman redeemer, the picture of our redemption by our kinsman redeemer, and the picture of redemption of Israel by her Lord God. So let's dive in. All right, next page. Chapter 1 starts out in the days when the judges ruled. There was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. So, it tells us when this book took place. When does it say?
The days when the judges ruled.
In the days when the judges ruled. So you know in your Bible, under the judges, it took place sometime during that period. After Moses died, Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land. And they were supposed to kill or enslave all of the Canaanites, lest these peoples and all of their, especially all of their high places, all of their idols and their statues. They were supposed to kill them lest they were seduced into their depraved and pagan ways. But the conquest was incomplete when Joshua died, and the Israelites found it more agreeable to settle down among the Israelites, trade, and sometimes intermarry with them. And sometimes they borrowed their morals and religious beliefs. And so that's why we see in the book of Judges that they go back and forth, the following God and going into worshiping other gods, etc. So God had promised Israel victory over the Canaanites if they remained faithful to him, but defeat and enslavement if they shared their loyalties with false gods. So again, in the book of Judges, we see repeating cycles of apostasy, oppression by foreign peoples, cries for help, and deliverance by the ever-faithful Lord. The book of Judges closes in chapter 21, verse 25. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So that kind of tells us a little bit about the times. So then it says there was a famine in the land. Famine was often a judgment, and sometimes it was a source of correction from the Lord. It tells us that in Ezekiel 14:13. Sometimes God will bring us through difficult times just to bring us back to him, bring us back to a place of surrender. All right, where does the book begin? Where are they? Where's man from? Well, first, where they?
First.
Where are they? Bethlehem.
Bethlehem.
What do you know about this town from other biblical texts? Now, there's two towns named Bethlehem, and so the text makes sure we know which one it was. There was one in Judah, and the other one was in Zebulunite territory. So this is the one in Judah. Let's look up these scriptures, just so we can kind of get an idea of this Bethlehem. Genesis 35:19. Whoever gets it first can go ahead.
So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephraim. Is that Ephraim? Over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day that pillar marks Rachel's tomb.
Okay, and that tomb was on the way to Bethlehem, Ephraim. So that's where Rachel's tomb is in Bethlehem. So we know that it's in the Bible all the way back in Genesis. It talks about this town. All right, 1 Samuel 16:1.
The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king."
Okay, so this passage tells us that Bethlehem was where the tribe of Judah lived, and that's where David was from. So David was from this town of Bethlehem in Judah. And then Matthew 2:1. You can probably guess what that was. Matthew 2:1. Tells us somebody was born there. Jesus, right.
After Jesus was born in Bethlehem.
Okay, so it's the same town where Jesus was born.
This one, yes.
Right, all right. So this is an important town in the biblical texts. Now, the next page. Or maybe you don't have it. I better not do that. Because I think when I put my notes in here, it changes. What does the name Bethlehem mean? Does anybody know? It means house of bread. Okay, so there was a famine in the house of bread. And what are the names of the main characters? What's the first one? No? Not on these passages. Who's the dad?
Oh, hold on.
Elimelech.
Yeah.
Elimelech's the first one. And then we have his wife. What's her name? Naomi. And what are their two boys?
Mahlon and Kilian.
Mahlon and Kilian. Right. Now, Elimelech actually means, my God is king. That's really ironic because Elimelech didn't trust that God, his king, would provide for him and his family. Right? He saw that there was a famine in the land. What'd you say?
What's it mean?
What does it mean again?
Elimelech? It means my God is king. My God is king. That's what his name means. But he didn't trust that God, his king, was going to provide for his family. And so he took them to Moab. What does Naomi mean? Anybody know? It means pleasant. Naomi means pleasant. Sometimes there's still people today with that name, Naomi.
Yeah.
It's an older name, but it means pleasant. All right, now for the names of the boys. Mahlon means weakness, sickness, or puny.
Wow, great.
So I don't think he was a very healthy baby. Because they usually named him, kind of after things like that. So he was a sickly baby, and so his name means weakness, sickness, or puny. And Kilion means annihilation, consumption, or pining, as in tired, So he wasn't very healthy either. Consumption, annihilation, or pining, as in tired. So why did they leave? Because of the famine. There was no bread in the house of bread. And from the different commentaries I've studied, they think that Elimelech was probably a wealthy man. And so he decided he could take his wealth and he could make money elsewhere. And maybe his crops didn't do well there, or if he was a farmer, and he was going to go try to make his fortune elsewhere. But notice it says they went to sojourn there. When somebody goes to sojourn someplace, it means they don't really intend to stay. They're just going to go for a time. So they went to sojourn in Moab. All right, now where did they go? Moab. Look at the map on page 28.
Very back.
Last page, yeah. So you see the Dead Sea, and here where it says Judah, right below the word Judah is Beersheba. And right up above there's a star, it's Jerusalem, and right below the star is Bethlehem. So Bethlehem wasn't that far away from Jerusalem. But you see, Moab is all the way on the other side of the Dead Sea. They would have had to go around the Dead Sea and further south. So they actually traveled about 120 miles. It was 120 miles. And Moab was this expansive grain-filled plateau between the Dead Sea and the eastern desert. What country is there today? I know.
Starts with a J.
Jordan.
Jordan.
It's Jordan today. Much of eastern Moab was steep land, semi-arid waste, not profitable for cultivation, but excellent for grazing of flocks of sheep and goats. Moab was regarded by the Israelites as an inferior people. There was open hostility towards them. Because when the Israelites were coming from down here, from the Sinai Desert, they were going up along the eastern side of the Dead Sea, they had to go through Edom and Moab. And the Moabite king, Balak, tried to put a curse on them through Balaam. Remember that story? What happened to Balaam?
Donkey talks.
What?
The donkey talks?
That's right. That's when the donkey talked. Right. So that was Moab. When they were going through Moab, that's when that happened. The Moabite king hired Balaam to come and put a curse on the people, and 3 times he tried to get him, and finally came, and every time he tried to put a curse on him, God told him to bless him. So, but he still had the animosity towards Moab. But then, after that, the Moabite people said, well, one way we can get to them is that we can try to marry some of their wives and get them to worship our gods, and that didn't work. So that was, there was animosity there between Moab and the Canaanites, or Israelites, I'm sorry. Now, actually, in Deuteronomy 23, 3 through 6, let's look at that, because that's kind of important. Deuteronomy 3, 3 through 6. This is Moses. Moses actually decreed a law against them in Deuteronomy. He said, so the Lord our God also delivered into our hands Og, king of Bashan, with all his people, and we attacked him until he had no survivors remaining. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we did not take from them. No, that's not the right scripture.
Not the right scripture.
That's not it. Okay, I'll find that later. I will find that again. So anyway, there was a law against marrying a Moabite, because Moab was a land of debauchery, it was a land of idolatry, and they worshiped the god Chemosh. The worship of the god Chemosh involved child sacrifice. They sacrificed their children as a burnt offering to that god. But that's another reason that they were not liked. Okay, Ruth 1, 3 through 5. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. So what were the dangers in marrying Moabite women? Why would it be bad for them to marry Moabite women?
Well, there was a law against it.
There was a law against it, but also,
They didn't treat them well when they left Egypt. Those were
Right.
some of the first people they fought against. In fact, that was the command in Deuteronomy 23:3. No Ammonite or Moabite is to enter the congregation. Those nations didn't treat you with hospitality on your travels out of Egypt. On
okay,
top of that, they hired Balaam.
23, 3 through 6, yes. That was the scripture, 23, 3 through 6.
23.
23, yes. I had looked at 3. It's 23. Thank you, Dan. So, do you think they would have married them if their father was still alive? You know, just if you think about it, I think so long as Dad was alive, if they kept separate, they knew they were just going to be there for a short time. They kept separate to themselves. But after Dad died, then they married Moabite women, and they planned to stay. I mean, they'd already been there for 10 years. They planned to just settle down in the land of Moab. Part of the danger of marrying Moabite women was that they would turn to their gods. Because we often saw that in the scriptures, yes. And so, and we're going to see later that Orpah was still worshiping the gods of Moab. All right, what were the names of their wives? Orpah and Ruth. Orpah means back of the neck. And that's interesting because back of the neck is what you see when someone turns away. And we're going to see later that Orpah turned away. So that means back of the neck. Ruth, on the other hand, means friend or companion. Friend or companion. So what was Naomi's situation without a husband or sons?
Not good.
Not good?
She had just anybody to take care of her.
That's right. She had nobody to take care of her. And here she is, she's a stranger in this foreign land. She's a woman without a husband, without sons. There's nobody to provide for her. And if the family name were to carry on, there had to be an heir. But having no sons, Naomi was left totally without hope in this foreign land. Okay, Ruth 1, 6 through 7. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. What did Naomi decide to do and why?
Sent her daughters-in-law back to them.
Well,
Next
her
one.
and her daughters-in-law,
Yeah.
right. She decided to return home to Bethlehem.
Right.
Why?
There was food there.
Right. She heard that the famine was over. She heard the famine was over, and so she decided to return. How many of them started out on the journey? All 3 of them. All 3 of them started out. Now there's a key word in these verses. The key word is return or go back. This word is used several times in this first chapter, and it's actually an illustration of repentance. We see that Naomi reversed the direction that she and her husband had taken. She turned away from Moab. She turned away from the heirs of the past. And she turned her back on the tragic graves of her loved ones, and she headed back to Judah, her homeland. I have this microphone because Bob Carter always needed it. Do we really need it?
Leave it on, it's not picking it up.
All right. It's okay.
If you're recording.
Is it good? All right. All right, Ruth 1, 8 through 9.
Thank you.
Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you would find rest in the home of another husband." Why do you think Naomi changed her mind and told her daughters-in-law to return to Moab? Remember, they'd already started out. Why do you think she changed her mind?
Because she didn't have anything, and how could she take care of them?
That's right. Yeah.
Was she afraid that they wouldn't be treated properly?
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. They were Moabite women, foreigners. What do you think her feelings were toward them?
I think she loved them.
I think she loved them, yes. So she knew that their chances of finding husbands in Bethlehem would be slim. But I think that they must have loved Naomi to even have considered following her, to start out with her. And she thought more of their welfare than her own. Because if they came with her, they could help to support her. But all of Elimelech's wealth was now gone, and she was left penniless. All right, Ruth 1, 10 through 13. But Ruth and Orpah replied, how many of them? We will go back with you to your people. But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and they gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." This is one of those passages where you really need to understand the Jewish laws and Jewish ways, to understand what in the world she's talking about. So let's turn to Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 6. 25, 5, and 6. This is the law of levirate marriage, is what this is called. It says, if brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So, if a man died and he didn't have any sons, then his brother was supposed to marry his wife. And the first child then would be as though it was the brother's son. And so any of his inheritance then would go to that son. And that was to preserve the property of the family. Right? So that's what she's talking about here. When she says, if I had another husband and had sons, would you wait for them? That's what she's talking about. Now, it looks like despite all of the debauchery that was in that land, that Ruth and Orpah were faithful to their husbands while they were alive. And Naomi was a righteous woman. So there's debate about whether Ruth and Orpah actually turned to Yahweh, but it's interesting that when Naomi talks about this very Jewish law of levirate marriage, they seem to be familiar with it. So it seems like she had taught them, the ways of their God. She taught them the ways of Yahweh, and so they were somewhat familiar with that. And of course, they had kept separate to themselves, and they would have still observed the Sabbath and the Jewish laws. So they seemed to be familiar with what she was talking about. It's interesting. Now, what was Naomi's state of mind?
I almost thought bitter when I read this before, because she felt the Lord turned against her.
Yeah, she was kind of bitter. I don't think she was that even depressed. She was bitter. She blamed God. She blamed God for her situation. All right, Ruth 1:14-15. At this, they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. So what was Orpah returning to? She was returning to her gods and the way of life of her people. She decided that she would turn back. Luke 1:16-17. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. That's a very familiar passage. So what was Ruth doing when she determined to go with Naomi? What was she giving up? Think about it. What was she actually
Other
doing?
pagan gods.
She what?
Her pagan gods.
She was giving up her pagan gods,
her
right?
family.
So she was turning her back on her old life. She said she would embrace her religion, so she was embracing a new religion, and she was putting her future in God's hands. She was also pledging to support her mother-in-law, and she probably thought she was giving up any chance of ever marrying again. But she chose a life with Naomi over her family, over her national identity, over her religious idolatry, and she was adopting the people and God of Naomi. So it was really a huge thing. Now, Naomi tried to discourage Ruth 3 times, but Ruth showed her sincerity 4 times. if you look back here, several times she said, go back, go back, go back. Ruth said, where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Now, there's an interesting fact that, and this is true even today, if someone wants to convert to Judaism, they go before this judge or rabbi, and he tries to discourage them 3 times to test their sincerity, see if they're really sincere. If they insist 4 times, they are accepted as a candidate for conversion. Now, Ruth has no reason to go with Naomi except love for her and her God. So do you think that Naomi had been silent about her faith in God?
No.
Or again, I think she'd been very open. She was a very religious woman, and she was very faithful to God. Even though she blamed God for her situation, she had shared her faith.
I think Ruth knew what she was getting into because Naomi had been open.
Yes, I think so too. I mean, she talked about her homeland and the people, and told her that she'd be accepted. Probably didn't say she'd get married, have a chance of marriage, but yeah,
Okay.
she knew about. She'd been introduced to Yahweh. All right, carrying on. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred up. Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Now remember, what did Naomi's name mean?
Pleasant?
Pleasant. Her name meant pleasant. And what does she want them to call her instead?
Bitter.
Mara, which means, Mara means bitter. Mara means bitter. Now, their question, can this be Naomi, suggests that they remembered Naomi, and they remembered that she'd gone out, and they were all excited about going to this new land, but she had experienced a visible change. She didn't look the same now. And obviously for the worse. They're like, can this be Naomi? When Naomi left Bethlehem, she was dressed in fine clothing, and now she was in rags. And of course, Ruth is in the same condition, because they don't have any money. Is it easy to live with someone who's bitter?
No.
Okay. So think of Ruth too. She's going with her mother-in-law who is bitter, but she still decides to stick by her side. And who was Naomi blaming? And how often do we blame God for our problems? When really it's just a result of our own decisions or judgment for our own actions. And then it's important that it says the barley harvest was beginning. The barley harvest began toward the end of April. Toward the end of April is when the barley harvest began. All right, now we're going to look at Ruth as a picture of salvation. Romans 5:14 says, "Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who is a type of him to come." What is a type or a pattern in the NIV? Anybody know what a type means? What does that word mean? A type is a pattern. It's a picture of something, the future. Typology is Bible symbolism. So it's when God uses human stories to explain spiritual truth. It's pictures that we can relate And so, Adam was a type of him who was to come. Who was him who was to come? That's Jesus, right. Now let's look at Hebrews 8:5. Hebrews 8:5. This is talking about the tabernacle. And it says that the tabernacle in the wilderness was a type of something. Hebrews 8:5.
Do you want somebody to read it?
Yeah, go ahead. Anybody get that?
They serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and shadow of what is in heaven. This
Okay.
is,
Okay. So the tabernacle was a copy or shadow, and some of the versions say a type of heaven. So that's why when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, you know, and he was bringing the 10 Commandments on stone, that's not all he was carrying. You could also picture him as having a roll of blueprints under his hand and his other arm, because he had the plans for the tabernacle at the same time. God told him to build the tabernacle in a very, very specific way. That's because it was a pattern or a picture of God's throne in heaven. So that, if you study the tabernacle, that's just a really important study. Fascinating study. I've done that here too. We're going to look at 3 types in this book. Ruth is a type of Gentile bride.
Gentile life.
Gentile bride. Naomi is a type of Israel. And Boaz is a type of Jesus. A picture of Jesus. Think of a type as a picture. So, if you think about chapter 1, Ruth is a Gentile. And who does she learn about God from? And Naomi is a Jew. So, the Gentile learns about God from a Jew. Where do we first learn about God? We're going to go ahead and read John 4:22. John 4:22. My glasses to see this, but I can't see this. And this is Jesus speaking. He says, "You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." Right? Remember that passage? Salvation is of the Jews.
Crystal,
Yes.
move your cup. Thank you.
The Jewish people were set apart by God to walk in fellowship with Him and to glorify Him among the Gentiles. Naomi had learned about God, but she hasn't developed a relationship with Him yet. She just has a knowledge of God, of Naomi. And you know, when we first become believers, it's really just head knowledge, isn't it? We don't really know. We still need to develop a relationship with our Lord. Wayne, would you go turn the camera? You know how?
Yeah,
The last
wait,
two.
wait, wait.
Thank you.
Back here.
Yes, the last two on the right. What is required of Ruth in order to accept the God of Naomi as her own? Any ideas? She has to completely turn from her old life. She has to enter a land that's completely different and unfamiliar. And she has to put her life in God's hand and trust that He's going to guide and direct her, meeting her needs. When we become a Christian and we accept Lord as our Savior, we are to completely turn from our old life, and we enter into a new life that some people are afraid. They don't know, well, what's God gonna require of me if I become a Christian, right? They're to turn away from our old life in repentance and go into a totally new life. Sometimes it's totally different and unfamiliar. So she has to put her life in God's hand and trust that He's gonna guide and direct her to meet her needs. And that's what we have to do when we become Christians. We don't really know God that well yet, but somebody's told us about Jesus and has told us about the Christian way of life, and we have to say, yes, I will trust that this God is what you say, and get to know Him better, right? Okay, any questions about chapter 1? Anything you didn't get written down that you missed? Did I go too fast?
Pretty fast.
Sometimes I go too fast. I'm sorry. Yes. So any questions? Want to talk about anything that you understand? About this?
You said, where did we first learn about God? You said John 4:22?
Yes.
Is that the answer to that?
Well, no, from the Jews.
Oh,
Yeah. We first learned about God from the Jews. That's why they were set up as a separate people, is to point us to God. And Jesus was a Jew, and we learn about God from Jesus, right? And actually, if you think about it, our whole Western way of life, all of our laws and all, came from the Jews. Our morality, the 10 Commandments, the things that we follow, they all come from the Bible, which was written by, was from God through the Jews.
I found out in church today there are 613 laws.
Yes. No, 316.
No, 600.
613.
613. Okay.
She's right.
That they've come up to.
Well,
You
I
think
just got back from church, so.
Yeah. You would know.
Yeah, if they've written every little one down.
The minister said, on Sunday you can't work, so even if you had a gnat flying around, if you're swatting it, that's working. You'd have to pinch it with your 2 fingers and for it not to be worked on the
Mr.
Sabbath.
Miyagi, yeah.
And they have to cook all their meals the day before.
Yeah.
That's right.
Crazy.
Yeah, we wouldn't survive very long under those rules.
If you read Leviticus, you just know that was quite a burden to bear on your back. And I'm so
Yeah.
thankful that Jesus came, and now we no longer have to do it. It's the grace of God,
That's right.
forgiveness of sin.
Yes, there were many
God gave them the 10 Commandments, and they had to write over 600 laws to keep the 10
Yeah.
Commandments.
That's right, that's right.
It's terrible.
But the 10 Commandments are still, valid in our lives today.
Yes.
So,
The whole book, I think, is of Ruth. God works through circumstance where we are. God meets us where we are. Naomi could have chose to go differently. God would have worked with that. Rahab the harlot. We're like, really? The harlot? Mentioned in the lineage of Christ?
that's right.
God works with it.
That's right. And I've told this picture before, this illustration before. I can look at our lives as being this long, we think of a timeline of our lives, all right? From the time we're born until we die. Write it up. And then you can put on that timeline this blue line. And the blue line is the line that God planned for us. God it says that the days of our lives were planned even before we're born. They're written down in the book in Psalms 139. And so God has a plan for our lives. However, we also have free will. And so then you see this red line. And this red line is the path that we decided to follow. And it goes up here, and it goes down here, and every which way. And I think in heaven, we're gonna see that there were blessings along the way that we missed, because we decided to go our own way. But then you see the purple line. Purple line is where they converge, because even though we go the wrong way, God has a
Brings you
plan
back.
to bring us back.
Yes.
And so when we finally, our will goes along with what God had planned, then it's a purple line that we'll see. And so I just imagine seeing that in heaven, all the ways that we went, and when we revolve along God's path, and then the way's purple.
I always wonder, when you see the clouds, when I step in that cloud, am I gonna just walk on it, or am I gonna fall through? I'm just, in the plane, I was like, I just wanna step on this cloud, I just wanna step on it, I just wanna lay on it.
Now, I like to look at the clouds and think of the glory of the Lord, because when they set up the tabernacle and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, then there was this cloud above the tabernacle. And they could actually see, the presence of the Lord. And then when it was time for them to move on, the cloud lifted up, and they followed the cloud, and then it would lower, and they knew that they were supposed to stop there for a while. Sometimes it was a few days, sometimes it was months. But so
When I ride in the car, I'm constantly looking in the clouds, whether here, there, because I'm gonna spot something one day.
and then what's going to happen in the clouds one day? What? That's right. He's going to come back in the clouds. He went up into the clouds, and he's going to come back in the clouds. So when you look at the clouds, just think about God's glory in the future. Jesus coming back in the clouds.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got the story of Naomi and Elimelech and their sons. They went into Moab. They didn't trust in the Lord that He was going to provide for them in the house of bread. So they went into Moab, and they were just going to go for a short time. But then Daddy died, and the sons decided to stay and to get married. They married a couple of Moabite women, and then they were left destitute. So then boys died, and so then Ruth decided to go back home to Bethlehem. Both of them started to go with her, but Orpah turned back, and Ruth decided to go with her. So now we've got Ruth, who's a Gentile. It comes from worshiping these idols that actually sacrifice their children to the God. It was really, if you go into that religion, it was really awful, but she came out of. And so she's going to go and follow Naomi to where she doesn't know where. She doesn't know what's ahead of her.
On this, when a husband dies, his brother is supposed to marry the widow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that even if he's already married?
I'm sorry?
Is that even if the brother is already married?
Yes.
They had a lot of wives back then.
You could have
Yeah, very
more.
well.
But they might just father a child for his brother.
Okay.
He didn't have to necessarily.
Like wind up in Salt Lake City.
But yeah, it was because the land was so important. When they went into the land, that each of the tribes was given their own inheritance, and it was part of the family. That you didn't want to let go of that part of the land. It was part of your family inheritance, and so it was just to keep his name from disappearing. So he would have a son that could take his portion of the land.
So do you know at what point God made it?
Not so.
Not so.
Yeah.
The New
Not where you
Testament.
couldn't marry more than one woman.
No, I don't.
It's a good question. You probably need to answer for us next week.
Thank goodness we're under grace and not the law. They didn't eat shellfish either.
We know that Jacob and Esau had more than one wife, of course. Jacob had
Or I can have Rod look it up.
Yeah.
He's got a set of
Yes.
encyclopedia.
Yes.
so.
He likes.
Jacob and Esau had many wives, and I think it was just a way to keep the land in with the family. So obviously it's still going on at this time,
Yeah.
so.
A good book that answers many of those questions is Glenn Greenwood, Bible, Manners, and Customs. He makes it clear the Bible was written in Eastern culture
Yes,
at an Eastern time.
that's right, that's right. And it's important for us to understand the Eastern culture, to really understand the word. And the study that we did last spring was about that. Look in the land. Look at that. And we learned where Jesus was really born, wasn't born in a cave. And up to that, right. Okay. That's all, we're just gonna do chapter 1 today.